The wind in Dry Creek whispered low across the auction yard, carrying the scent of dust, horse sweat, and the sharp tang of desperation. The sun beat down mercilessly on the crowd, turning every shadow into a blessing. Beneath a sagging wooden platform, a girl stood barefoot, her dress faded to the color of ashes, her hands folded quietly in front of her. She was young, maybe 20, her black hair neatly braided, though a few strands clung to her cheek in the heat. Her gaze was lowered, not in shame but in practiced silence, as if she'd long since learned that the world gave more mercy to those who didn't meet its eyes. The auctioneer barked names and numbers like a man who'd sold off pieces of his own soul long ago. Behind him, a string of humans stood, immigrants, debtors, orphans, each with a number pinned to their chest. The girl wore no number. She had no words, no claim. Just a whisper among the crowd. Chinese girl, came with the railroad crew, no English, 3 weeks in the sheriff's holding, nobody wants her. That whisper found Silas Boone as he leaned against the far post, one boot planted in the dry earth, the other resting heel first on the fence rail. He looked like he belonged to the shadows, grizzled, sun-worn, with a hat pulled low and a face carved out of tired stone. He wasn't there for a girl. He'd come for salt beans, maybe a new shovel if the price was right. But as the girl stepped up and the crowd turned away in discomfort or disinterest, something old and aching rose inside him. Not pity, not want, just recognition. $3, someone muttered, half a joke. The auctioneer scoffed. $3 for the China girl? She won't talk. Might run. I won't take her back. Silas didn't speak. He simply raised 3 fingers. The movement was small, but it silenced the yard. A laugh cracked out from somewhere. Someone clapped mockingly. Sold, the auctioneer called with relief, slapping the podium. To Boone. Of all folks. No one clapped after that. The girl lifted her eyes for the first time, searching for the voice that had claimed her. What she found instead was a man whose coat flapped against her shoulders, draped there with quiet hands and no words. He turned without ceremony and walked away. She followed. They rode in silence. The horses' hooves clacked against the earth, kicking up little puffs of red dust. He offered her the saddle and took the back. She held the reins like she'd seen it done, unsure, trembling. When they reached the outskirts of town, Silas pointed once, down a barely there path that led into a grove of juniper and pine. She followed it. His ranch sat quiet in a hollow between 2 hills, the land wide and overgrown, fences sagging, the barn dark and leaning. The house, or what was left of it, bore the scars of fire and time, charred boards, half a roof, and windows long gone. But there was still shelter. A small bunkhouse behind the barn, once meant for hired hands, now held the scent of old leather and oil. Silas dismounted and unloaded the supplies. Without speaking, he handed her a bucket and nodded toward the well. She took it. He didn't know her name and she didn't ask for his. That first evening, she boiled water and cleaned the room without being told. She found a rusted tin of tea in a cupboard and brewed it. The smell drifted soft and earthy across the barn, mixing with the scent of hay and worn saddles. When she handed him the cup, he accepted it with both hands. He didn't say thank you. She didn't expect it. In the days that followed, Malin, he heard her name only once from the sheriff's bored lips, moved like a ghost through the ranch, tidying the remnants of someone else's life. She patched a curtain from torn muslin. She scrubbed the stone hearth until her knuckles bled. She cleared the ashes inside without knowing whose memories they once held. Silas watched. He did not stop her. She spoke little. A few words in English. Yes. No, water. He did not press. He knew what it meant to hold pain behind silence. He had done it for 12 winters, ever since the fire took his brother and his brother's wife and their little girl, who used to laugh on the swing he'd built with his own hands. The swing still hung, crooked, from the cottonwood tree. No one had touched it since. Malin noticed it on the 3rd morning. She straightened the rope and wiped the board clean. When Silas saw her do it, He felt a strange twist in his chest. Not anger. Something else. Something like breath returning. Townsfolk noticed her too. Tessie McGraw, who ran the dry goods store, stared longer than was polite when Malin came in for flour. Sheriff Dillard asked Silas, "You runnin' a charity now, Boone?" and laughed like it was just a joke. It spread, as things do in small towns, rumor traveling faster than any horse. Folks said Boone bought himself a bride from the east, that he'd gone soft, that he'd lost his mind out there in the hills. Silas didn't answer. He never did. But Malin heard. At the edge of the market, in the hush behind her back, in the smirks that followed her footsteps, she carried it all without flinching. Only once did she falter, at the well alone when she thought he couldn't see. Her shoulders shook, her face turned to the dirt. But when he stepped near, she stood straight and kept drawing water. That night, a summer storm swept through the hills. The wind howled and rain battered the barn roof. Malin vanished. Silas found her on the roof, barefoot, trying to nail down a loose board that clapped with every gust. He climbed up beside her. She didn't protest, only pointed once, wordless, where the nail had slipped. In the flicker of lightning, her palm tore open on the rusted metal. Silas caught her hand. Blood streaked across her fingers, bright against the storm. Without a word, he wrapped it in his kerchief, the one he hadn't touched since the fire. She let him. Later, they sat by the hearth. She sipped tea from a cracked cup. He watched the flames, the silence between them as thick as the night outside. "You want to go?" he asked, his voice rough, like it hadn't been used in weeks. She shook her head. "No home left." He nodded. "Then this is yours. Until you want otherwise." She didn't answer. But when she rose to leave, she paused and touched the swing on her way past it. Just a finger against the old rope. Soft. As if to say, "I saw." And still, she stayed. Spring unfolded gently across the valley, coaxing color from the earth and warmth from stone. The hills around Silas Boone's ranch turned green for the first time in years, and the cattle, once skin-stretched and silent, grew lively with calves that kicked at the morning air. Amid this quiet rebirth, Malin moved like a thread pulled through the fabric of the land, mending things not with noise or orders, but with presence. She worked beside Silas, neither beneath nor behind him. She patched saddlebags with her careful stitches, learned to churn butter by watching, and soon cooked stews thick with herbs she'd coaxed to life in a strip of soil by the kitchen window. There was no declaration between them, no promise spoken aloud, but a rhythm took root, one that neither questioned. Silas noticed the difference not in moments, but in absence. The silence in the house no longer pressed down on him like a weight. He began waking with purpose, walking with less ache in his joint. He built a new gate for the barn. Not because it was needed, but because it would look better. She noticed. Said nothing. But one night, a small bowl of pickled radish sat by his plate, delicately prepared. He hated radish, but he ate every bite. Once, she laughed, open and brief, when he stumbled trying to split wood and nearly landed flat on his back. The sound startled them both, lingering in the air like the call of a bird not native to these parts. He didn't say anything, but later, he tossed her an old harmonica he found in the loft. She held it as if it were glass, then wiped it clean and placed it on the mantel. But not all things softened with time. One afternoon, when Silas was out riding the fence line, a wagon rolled slow and mean into the yard. 3 men stepped out, young, loud, the kind that didn't need drink to spit venom. They swaggered like the land owed them something. One leaned on the porch post and hollered, "Where's your little porcelain doll, Boone?" Malin stood just inside the door, eyes low, hands steady. She said nothing. They laughed. "We came to see if you're hiring, Mr. Boone. Or if she's already filled the position." She turned her back and disappeared inside. By the time Silas returned, the dust of their departure still hung in the air like smoke. Malin stood at the pump, drawing water with trembling arms. He approached, slow and quiet. She didn't look at him, but her voice was clear. I heard them. I understood enough. I'll speak to them, Silas said. She shook her head. It won't change them. No. But they'll know I heard too. She nodded once. Then, quietly, you don't have to protect me. He met her eyes. No. But I want to. She looked away. It's different. He didn't press. She returned to drawing water. That night, he slept with the rifle by the door. The next few weeks passed with a brittle kind of peace. The town kept its distance. Folks still whispered, but no one came riding again. Malin no longer visited the market alone. Silas bought what they needed, said little, and kept his hat low. The world hadn't changed, but the ranch, in its own way, had grown strong enough to hold them both. Then came the fire. It began with lightning, a sudden crack of blue against a black sky, followed by silence, then the unmistakable hiss of flames catching dry wood. The wind picked up fast, feeding the blaze. By the time Silas smelled it, the bunkhouse roof was already smoking. He yelled for Malin, but she was already running, barefoot, her braid flying behind her, her arms tight to her chest. She vanished into the smoke. He shouted her name, once, twice, but got only wind in reply. Then she reappeared, coughing, eyes red, clutching a wooden box blackened by heat. He caught her as she stumbled down the porch steps. "You fool," he muttered, gripping her tighter than he meant to. "You could have died." She looked up, tears streaking soot. "It's your brother's. The one with the carvings." He stared at the box, its lid warped but still intact. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a ribbon from a child's bonnet. He hadn't touched it in years. She'd saved his past. The fire ate the bunkhouse, but they salvaged what they could. Silas hauled water until his arms gave out. Malin wrapped towels around her face and doused embers with wet sheet. At sunrise, smoke curled skyward like incense. The air was heavy, but they stood side by side, breathless and unburnt. They moved into the barn. Not as before, not with her on straw and him in silence. They laid blankets together, cooked on stones, slept feet apart, but not in separate worlds. It took weeks to rebuild. Townsfolk offered nothing. No hammer, no nail. But Silas found the strength to cut fresh lumber. Malin painted walls with lime, softening the sting of memory with new colors. Together, they planted marigolds where the bunkhouse once stood. She hung red paper above the door. He fixed the swing so it no longer creaked. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the hills, they walked the pasture in silence. Cows grazed. Birds stirred in the high branches. She reached for his hand, not shy, not bold, just certain. He let her take it. She walked a while that way, their steps in rhythm, before saying, "They thought you bought me." "I did," he said softly. $3. She looked at him, smiling faintly. "But you never touched me." "I didn't need to." She stopped then, letting go of his hand, turning fully to face him. "I chose to stay. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to." He nodded, eyes brimming. "I know." They stood in that stillness, the land holding its breath around them, the wind warm and gentle as it passed. Later that night, she set the harmonica on the porch rail. He picked it up, pressed it to his lips, and let out a note, thin, a little off-key. She laughed again, fuller this time. He tried again. The sound carried into the dark, wrapping around the swing, the marigolds, the fresh boards of the house they had made. It wasn't a love story like people told in novels. It was built on work, on silence, on the kind of looking that sees not just the face, but the sorrow beneath it. And in the quiet, in the space between breaths and burdens, something sacred had grown. Not purchased, not owed, but freely given, and finally received.